Hey there. Welcome to Lead Fearlessly, Strategies of Confident Women Leaders, the podcast that will empower you to unleash your inner strength and embrace leadership with confidence. I'm your host, Katie Winchenbach, and I'm excited to have you join us as we dive into the experiences of extraordinary women who've shattered glass ceilings and redefined success on their own terms. Get ready to be motivated, challenged, and equipped with the tools and strategies to lead fearlessly in your own life and career. Today, we are joined by Lauren Tetenbaum. Lauren is a therapist and author. She has a great book coming out that we're going to talk about. She is an advocate for women really all over the world, and I am so excited to have her here today. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's always nice to connect with like-minded women, so pleasure to be here.
To kick us off, can you briefly introduce yourself to our audience and describe a little bit the journey of how you've gotten to where you are now?
Sure. So I am a mom of two. My kids are 8 and 6. And as you mentioned, I am a licensed therapist and a writer. And before those roles, I practiced as an immigration attorney. So while I have had a few different professional titles, my passion has always remained consistent, and that has been to advocate for and support women. And I did that from a young age. I knew that I would go to grad school in order to be an advocate for women. So I got my master's in social work and my law degree simultaneously. And I enjoyed practicing law. I was in the legal industry for about 10 years, first as an immigration lawyer, then in legal personnel roles. But once my kids were here and getting a little older, it became clear to me that there was such a need to support women in the workplace and maternal mental health. And I really set out to provide the support that I wish I had had. So I now work in private practice doing that.
That's amazing. I love that you really followed your intuition and followed your passion. Tell me a little bit about what it was like making that career pivot, because those are kind of two really different careers that you've had.
Yeah, so they are and they aren't for me. I went to law school with the goal of helping women. I'm very task oriented, so I thought that the law and filing petitions and going to court to get women orders of protection against their abusers, I thought that that would fit my passion and interests, and it did for a while. But even in that first year of law school, I felt like something was missing. And so that's why I simultaneously pursued my master's in social work, because I wanted to get that mental health lens and apply it to the work that I was doing. And over time, I became a mom and working in an environment that was, counting billable hours in 6-minute increments. And it was hard sometimes to even see my baby. And then eventually the pandemic happened. I personally felt like it wasn't the right environment. A law firm wasn't the right environment for me. And I also knew that it wasn't just me. So while it was difficult to leave a corporate job and security in that way and health insurance benefits, I never thought I would be an entrepreneur, but I just took a leap of faith, and it's been really the greatest decision that I've ever made.
What are some of the lessons that you learned when you were becoming an entrepreneur? Maybe some things that really stood out to you as really helpful in getting your business off the ground?
Sure. So I think definitely be authentic. Like many women, I have lived much of my life concerned, if not outright worried about what other people would think. Do I have to perform in a certain way, to meet expectations. And I honestly let that go when I decided to launch my own business. And a quick kind of easy example to reflect that is when designing my website, I picked a lot of pink because it's my color. And I remember that some people said, well, you know, it might be too girly or unprofessional. And I said, I really just feel like it reflects me and my energy and personality. And frankly, if others don't connect with that, then they're not my, you know, target client or audience. And I've stuck with the pink and, you know, literally and figuratively, because it helps me feel like I'm acting in line with my values, my passions, my interests, and I'm not doing anything for anyone else. I'm behaving in line with who I am authentically. So definitely that is, I think, the first lesson. And then another lesson is be kind to others and rely on your community, whether that is for networking opportunities, for childcare favors, for emotional support, whatever it is. We are not meant to be doing anything alone, even if we are solo practitioners in whatever field we are in. And I think it's really important to lean into the people around you, even if they're not obviously a business connection. They can provide so much, and it's important to recognize that.
I think it's great that that's been a focus for you, because I feel like a lot of times as women, we're worried about asking for help. We're worried about seeming weak and asking questions. And I think it's really important to show that you can lean on those people around you and still find success.
Absolutely. And I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, believe and know that we are stronger together. I am in a community, a town where there are many other mental health professionals and others who work with the same population that I do. And some people might view that as competition. I definitely do not. I view it as collaborative. I'm constantly hosting events with other professionals, whether we have the same credentials or not. For example, I'm doing an event in April and another one in March with a yoga therapist and a dermatologist and other doctors and healthcare providers that we all work with women in their 30s and 40s. And it's just really cool to combine forces and refer to each other and just learn from each other and support each other. And it can be so empowering to do that as a team.
I think that idea of collaboration over competition is so important. And I also think in order for us to really be able to lean into that, you have to have confidence in what you're doing and what you're bringing to the table. Over the years, how have you built that confidence in yourself and in the value that you're bringing?
That's a really good question. And I work with a lot of women as a therapist who struggle with their confidence. I would say that I see that struggle often with women in their 20s who are emerging adults and navigating their identities in the workplace and relationships and, of course, shifting dynamics, right? They were recently a student or living at home and now they're out there in the world and it's scary. And of course, your confidence is rocked. But whether you are in your 20s or your 40s, wherever you are in your journey, I think that there's a couple ways to approach feeling like an imposter, which we all do sometimes, right? The first is sometimes I do encourage faking it till you make it. I think that women tend to, because we're socialized to, we tend to question ourselves and then kind of put that internal spotlight on us or project a spotlight that's on ourselves. When in reality, no one's really paying as much attention to you as you're paying attention to you. So if you behave in line with your values, I would say you're behaving the right way for yourself. And that alone should bring you confidence. And if it doesn't, then pretend it does, because it will eventually. And the other piece is that if you're feeling unsure of yourself, check in with yourself. Ask yourself why. Is there something that you could learn more about? Maybe you aren't the expert in whatever people are thinking that you are. That's okay, right? We're not born experts. We all need to learn. So learn more, or check in with yourself and ask yourself if it's because of a certain thing that someone said. And then ask yourself, well, do you even really respect that person? Right? So it's okay to be less sure of yourself, but I believe that if you act in line with your values, you'll be okay.
The idea of values and finding your values and acting in alignment with those has come up a couple of times in our conversation. I think that's so important. And I wonder what tips you might have for someone who is just really getting started in their career and thinking, I don't even know what my values are. I don't even know what I want to align with or what I should be looking for.
Yeah. That's a great point and a good reflection, because you're right. I have been saying it a lot. Maybe because I do tend to do a lot of values exercises with my clients. So that is one way to consider what your values are. I also think that it's important to remember that you don't need to make blanket decisions for the rest of your life today. Just start small, right? So if you are navigating, for example, a difficult situation at work and getting a lot of pressure from a boss or something like that to reply, to get to a deadline, but you have something else conflicting. I don't know. I'm thinking back to when I was a junior associate. Just check in with yourself about that particular situation, right? What is important to you here? And just to further highlight that, the situation I'm thinking of in particular was when I was an associate. I was also a new mom. My baby was about 13 weeks old, and we had a busy season, and they were asking the associates to come into the office on a Sunday. And I hadn't seen my kiddo really all week, and I had finished the work that I personally needed to do. And I was able to do the rest of the work, such as reviewing the paralegal's work, from home. And I made the decision to set a boundary and to say, I'm going to be working from home today because I want to be with my family. And I wasn't late for any deadlines or anything like that. And that was a moment where I had to assess what were my values, what were my priorities. And doing a good job at work was certainly a value. Not, pissing anyone off was certainly a value. But for me, the value that stood out was being present with my family. And I felt like I could, do a good job with all of that if I prioritized that top value. So that's what I did.
Setting boundaries is so incredibly important. And I think that story you just shared really highlights how critical it is to practice that. Because I do think it is a practice, and practice setting those boundaries to help you get to where you want to go.
Yeah. And it's hard to set boundaries, but it's worth it. And I think that even if you think you have a dream job, but then you do something like this, and then maybe that dream job doesn't continue to be your dream job, I really believe that you'll have no regrets because you acted according to your values and you set those boundaries according to your values. And that's so important. And it alleviates the anxiety that we so often feel when we don't have the right boundaries in place.
I think too, one thing you mentioned that just stood out to me and I want to highlight is that idea of the dream job. And as you get further along, maybe it's not the dream job. And I know personally I've had that experience where you think you're going into something and you're like, this is what I'm going to want to do for the rest of my life. And I think for women especially, there's a lot of pressure and expectation for continuing to improve and grow and aim for promotions and excel and get this, big title. But what I think is also important is figuring out what success really means to you. And I think that's something you've done a really excellent job with in your career of evaluating where you're at and figuring out, like, what does success mean to me? And I'm curious, now that you're growing your own business and you've got your values and your priorities established, how are you measuring success for yourself?
It's a great question. And as you asked it, what stood out to me was the wording about checking in with yourself and thinking about what is important to me right now, because that can change, right? I think I have always had the values of empathy and family, but also ambition and success. And what did success look like for me? You're right that in my 20s, it looked different than what it might look like today. So I would say it's okay for your definitions to change, for your dream job concept to change, for your needs to change. And it's important to give ourselves that self-compassion of a shifting identity and recognizing that what might work for us today might not work for us tomorrow. And as women, we tend to beat ourselves up for that and to be our own biggest critics. But I'm a big believer in being your own biggest cheerleader. So I would say, be nice to yourself. Everything is temporary. Everything is a chapter. And it's okay to make changes, even if you did invest a lot of time, money, energy into going to law school, for example. It's okay to no longer be a practicing attorney if that's what feels right for you.
That concept of being kind to yourself, I think, is not talked about enough. And I think especially for women is just so important.
I agree. And it's my favorite therapeutic tool, this idea of self-compassion. Talk to yourself the way you would a friend. Even if your friend made a mistake or did something you don't agree with, you likely wouldn't make her feel even worse and say, yeah, that was really dumb, right? You'd say, okay, you made a mistake. Tomorrow is a new day and you're still a good mom and you're still a good employee and, you have a beautiful spirit, whatever it is. And mistakes are going to happen. Bad things, struggles are going to happen. But it's the way that we navigate them that makes all the difference. And I encourage people to navigate them with self-kindness.
I think that's an important point to emphasize because you're right. Mistakes will always happen, no matter how excellent you are at your job, no matter how much of an expert you are. Everybody makes mistakes. And I think it is important really for us to give ourselves that grace and not beat yourself up over that.
Absolutely. And it takes practice. Again, we're conditioned to be hard on ourselves, but do practice. If it takes journaling or even talking out loud, talk to yourself the way that the person who loves you most in this world would talk to you.
That's a great tip. I love framing it that way. Let's pivot a little bit and talk about this book you have coming out. So your book, Lauren, is focused on millennial menopause and really preparing for what's to come. What inspired you to dig into this topic and write this book?
Thank you for asking. So I, like many lawyers and law students, I've always loved writing. It was a creative outlet for me. And I have always been passionate about reproductive health and women's rights. And as a therapist, I've gone through many advanced clinical trainings on the perinatal period and the reproductive lifespan of a woman in terms of fertility and fertility struggles and things like that. So I am about to be 40, and it occurred to me last year that I had had all this education and knowledge and experience sort of up to this phase of my life, my midlife I was about to be entering into. And it occurred to me that I had no idea what was coming next. And at first I felt maybe it was just me. And, I was never a science kind of gal. So I thought maybe I just missed something, but then I started asking questions, and I started realizing that none of my peers knew anything about menopause. No one could really point to seeing it represented in the media other than a hot flash. And then it also turned out that most doctors in this country and medical professionals get very little training on menopause as well. So I wrote an article that ultimately led to an opportunity to write this whole book. And over the past year, I have been speaking with hundreds of women, including over 40 experts in women's health. I've spoken to gynecologists, neurologists, nutritionists, women who are in the finance sector and investing in femtech products and services. And it really was such an eye-opening, enjoyable experience because I not only learned about what was coming next for myself, my peers, my clients, but also how we as women can collectively advocate for what we need when it comes to menopause healthcare and all of our reproductive healthcare.
And this is an area that is so important for women to be empowered with knowledge and to be able to advocate for ourselves.
Absolutely. And the average age of menopause, which I learned, I did not know, but the average age is 51. And perimenopause, which is the period of time around menopause, the symptoms of perimenopause can occur up to 10 years prior. So that does bring us to typically, on average, one's early 40s, which is exactly where I'm at personally. And what I have learned from all of these women who are postmenopause is that they wish they had known about perimenopause and menopause before they went through it because they knew nothing. And because they knew nothing, they were suffering. They thought they were going crazy. They thought that no medical treatment was available. They felt totally alone. They wasted hundreds of hours going from doctor to doctor when, we don't have time for that. It was really a struggle. And just the psychoeducation of you're not crazy, you're not alone, help is available. That can go so far. And it's been a pleasure and privilege to spread that message.
And how can someone get your book? I see as we're recording this, it's available for pre-order. When is it going to be hitting the shelves?
It will be officially published July 15th. So a few more months, and I will be going around the US. I have a couple of events and fun community service opportunities around women's health planned so far in the New York area and California. And I am just really passionate about bringing these previously taboo topics to the surface, out of the shadows. And it doesn't matter if you're years away from menopause or it's years behind you. The power of women communicating and educating each other and sharing with each other cannot be underestimated.
I agree. And I love that you mentioned that this is kind of one of those topics that's a little more taboo. And I think that makes it even more important for us to gather and to talk about it and get comfortable making it something that's commonplace. It's something we all go through.
Exactly. Every woman goes through menopause, and men are about 50% of the population. This is not a niche thing. This is not a weird thing. This is just part of our development. And, every person is different. I'm not saying you necessarily need to share all of your symptoms with the whole world, but it is really reassuring to know that you're not alone and that support is available however you might need it.
And we're going to have a link to your website and to pre-order the book, Lauren, in the show notes. So if this is something you're interested in, definitely go into those show notes and check it out, and you can get more information there. And hopefully we can see some listeners at one of your events that you're going to be doing.
Absolutely. And yes, I will continue to add to my website all of the events that I'll be speaking at. And like we mentioned earlier, I love collaborating with other healthcare providers or just, women who are in this space in general. So if you want to plan something with me, definitely reach out as well.
I would love that. And Lauren, to wrap up this excellent conversation, I want to ask you to reflect back on everything that you've done over your career. And if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self about your career, your leadership, all of the things that are going to happen, what would that piece of advice be?
I would say don't get consumed by what other people are saying about you if they're not even people that you admire, and that you should be someone that you would admire.
That is powerful. I really, really love that mindset.
Thank you. And it takes practice and support. I did not, wake up like that when I was an adult, new adult in the world, new lawyer. But I am thankful that I am now in that place. And like I said, I'm now able to provide the support and guidance that I wish I had had in my earlier days. And it's so important to continue to spread that message with colleagues like you. So thank you for having me on.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining us, Lauren. This was really excellent. I think there were so many great insights in here. Head to the show notes to connect with Lauren on LinkedIn and to visit her website where you can pre-order a copy of her book and see the upcoming events that she has planned. Thanks for tuning in to Lead Fearlessly, Strategies of Confident Women Leaders. If you've been inspired by today's episode, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a friend who could use a confidence boost. Remember to subscribe so you won't miss out when we drop our next season. And if you found our conversations valuable, please leave us a 5-star review. Your support helps us continue to amplify the voices of incredible women leaders and inspire more fearless female trailblazers. We'll see you next time.